I am a human being and I killed human beings.
Before I knew it, I'd fired 4 shots at the door. I kept on shouting for Eva to phone the police.
Tests are underway to determine if a serial killer is on the loose in Centurion, Pretoria.
The dead won't bother you. It's the living you got to worry about.
In a country where 83 people are murdered every day, we have spent years right here on Profiler Africa warning about the systemic cracks beneath the surface of the crime statistics. These past 2 weeks, those cracks have shattered into a full-blown crisis. But at least the eyes of the nation are open, and hopefully that's going to lead to positive things. As always, I am joined by South Africa's leading forensic psychologist, Gerard, former head of the forensic psychology section at Saps, and of course, the most gorgeous man in crime.
Oh, it's the same message over and over. Not like it's a new message every time. So
I know, but I just love it. Before we continue, a quick reminder of how you can support the show. Do make sure you've subscribed first of all. That one, subscribe with notifications on, so you don't miss an episode. To help us keep the lights on, click join to become a channel member for exclusive perks, or you can use the buy me a coffee. Here's the QR code link. The link's in the description as well. And if you have any questions for Gerard or for us or for the show or for the channel or for me, you can email us at profilerafricainfo@gmail.com. We invite you to join the chat tonight. Please do get your questions in, anything related, of course, to the Quonazi bombshell and the president's response, and all the questions you've wanted to ask as well, because tonight we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to be answering your questions from the last few months. So we've put together a list of a bunch of our favorites, and we'll be tackling them over the next hour. Before we do that, though, let's talk about the story that we can't ignore, that has dominated South Africa's headlines this past week. Because it strikes at the very heart of the criminal justice system that we so often discuss right here on the show, isn't it, Gerard? It feels like, it feels like some of our conversation feels a little prophetic, considering the current situation. How do you feel about that, Gerard?
Well, it's kind of a bizarre situation for me because, I mean, I'm sitting on the other side of the planet and I'm kind of almost totally removed from all the sort of hubbub of what's going on. So, of course, when I catch up, I mean, it's a huge thing. It's a very huge thing, which I hope will lead to some major changes.
Yeah.
I think we need something massive like this. There's not going to be changes from the sort of groundswell upwards. It has to be something huge, bombshell like presidential intervention, and then we just hope that it goes the right route,
And the people need to get behind it, I think it's all about that, an awareness that kind of turns into action. Let's remind ourselves just what's happened thus far. I put together a little bit of a chronology here, Gerard, and I'll talk us through it. So in April 2024, and if you're not kind of familiar with just the basic nuts and bolts, this will kind of give you a little bit of just the basics. So in April 2024, engineer Armand Swart was murdered in Vereeniging, and firearms were recovered from the scene and sent for ballistic testing. Then on December 30th, 2024, according to Mkhwanazi, a ballistics expert issued a report linking the firearms from the Swart murder to several other high-profile shootings in Gauteng, including those of public figures and artists, because this story is not just dramatic, but it's kind of soap opera like in aspects. December 31st, 2024, the day after the report is issued, Minister Mkhunu allegedly sends a directive to disband the political killings task team that had commissioned the ballistics report. Then in early January, Quonazi alleges that a WhatsApp message is sent from an associate of the minister to Cat Matlala, informing him that the task team that harassed him has been dissolved. And we'll discuss who some of these folks are in a sec, if you're not familiar. Then in March 2025, case dockets from the disbanded task team are allegedly removed and sent to the office of Lieutenant General Shadrach Sabir in Pretoria. Then in May, Matlala is arrested on charges of attempted murder in a separate case. involving a local soap star. On Sunday, the 6th of July, 2025, just last week, Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi held his explosive press conference, of course, publicly leveling all the allegations against Minister Mkhunu, Lieutenant General Sabia, and Matlala. And then, of course, this past Sunday, we all sat down at 7 and waited, of course, because, the president's time is way more important than ours. It was till 7:30 for the president to address the nation, announcing he's establishing a judicial commission of inquiry and placing Minister Mkhunu on a leave of absence. And then, of course, today we've been watching the news to see folks in Durban marching, the Hands Off Quonazi march, showing public support for the commissioner, who certainly probably needs it at the moment. But he's, that's kind of what's happened up to now. We can also just highlight what the key allegations are then, and I'll go back to that. So the primary allegations, we're first looking at interference and collusion. So Mkhwanazi has accused Police Minister Senzo Mkhunu of interfering in sensitive police operations. He alleged the minister colluded with businessman Matlala, who is currently facing an attempted murder charge, like we mentioned, to disband the political killings task team. Of course, specialist units being shut down is something we discuss a lot on this show. The task team was disbanded, and Quonazi claimed the task team was shut down on December 31st, 2024, just one day after the ballistic report linked firearms from a murder case to several other high-profile shootings of public figures in Gauteng. He alleges this was done to shield politically connected syndicate members from prosecution. The allegation, of course, is that there's a vast criminal syndicate involved here. He stated that a police investigation had uncovered a massive drug cartel based up here in Gauteng that has infiltrated and controls elements within the Saps, Metro Police, Correctional Services, the NPA, and the Judiciary. So pretty much everywhere. And what are the smoking guns? Reporting highlights that the evidence for these links may be an AK-47 and a pistol recovered after the murder of engineer Armand Swart. And these weapons have allegedly been ballistically linked to the murders of several high-profile artists, including, of course, DJ Somebody in 2022. Okay, so that's the basic timeline. That's what's happened. I mean, Gerard, we've been talking about the fundamental structural challenges at the police, as we've experienced the politicization of the police service, if you like, going right back to the Celebi years. So like I say, we touched on it just now, but the signs have been there. It's, from our perspective, it's been a topic of conversation time and again.
Yeah, look, the police have always been politicized. Pre-94, they were politicized in a certain way. Post-94, they're politicized a different way. I do think that we saw with the sort of Jacob Zuma era where it was, as the state capture report says, basically the hollowing out and the selling out of government on all levels for the purposes of a handful of private people. So, and we're still suffering from that. That hasn't been fixed. Our police, our intelligence services specifically were then used for political purposes in South Africa. I have friends who work in national intelligence who said that in the Zuma years, they were basically told to sit and do nothing, while a parallel team, people who do the same work as them, was tasked with all sort of underhanded followings and tailings and tappings of phones, etc., etc.
Sure.
So whether that's been fixed, no. I think Cyril Ramaphosa's hands are very much tied. Because remember, we don't vote in a president like it is in the United States. We vote in a party. So, if he pushes too hard and targets the people that are very high up in the ANC, of course, he can be recalled. So he's on a bit of a tightrope. I think this has forced his hand to do something. And it was very brave of General Quonazi to take the step. He's broken ranks and spoken outside of police channels, effectively, which theoretically could bring him into a lot of trouble internally within the police. And I do think this rally of support by community, etc., and in the media is essential to helping just protect him to not be targeted for what he's saying. Now, of course, the truthfulness will have to come out. Allegations are true. I wouldn't be surprised if they are. I don't think anything that he said is beyond the realm of believable. We've had, the Scorpions were shut down for political reasons by Parliament, because they were getting too close to politicians, etc. So that kind of thing there's a precedent for it in a way in our country where successful things get shut down. I think that's why Celebi shut down the specialized units in 2006, closed down the serious and violent crime units, for example, which were highly successful at tackling, from organized crime like cash and transit robberies, et cetera, et cetera. So this wouldn't be the first time, not going to be the last. I just hope there's some positive change that comes from it.
Let's take a look at what the president has, what has announced. The basics were of his announcement this past Sunday, and essentially he's opened a judicial commission of inquiry led by retiring acting deputy Chief Justice Cat Matlala to investigate the infiltration of law enforcement by criminal syndicates. So get used to hearing the Matlala Commission. Minister placed on leave. He placed Minister Senzo Mkhwanazi on a leave of absence with immediate effect to ensure the commission can work without interference. And he has appointed a new acting minister in Professor Faraz Kachalia, respected law professor and chair of the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council. I mean, whoever's been the chair of the Anti-Corruption Advisory Council up to now, I don't know, should he instill much confidence? Because corruption doesn't seem to have been antied that much lately.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, time will tell, right?
Yeah. I guess some of the talking points here, I mean, it's this kind of continued discussion around the kind of state capture, the politicization of the police, like we've spoken about. What do we think of, what are your thoughts on Mkhwanazi as a policeman kind of involving himself here? I mean, he's gaining a heck of a lot of popularity extremely quickly, and with popularity comes power and influence, which is good in the sense that we want him to be able to kind of take on this case and really, tackle it in a meaningful way. But, it can be a double-edged sword a little bit, can't it?
Absolutely. Look, I mean, just recapping what I said last week about when we spoke about this for the first time. I mean, Quonazi or Nhlanhla Quonazi was the head of the Special Task Force, which is a highly specialized unit in the police. It's 10 times more than a SWAT unit. It's a very specialized group of trained people. My limited experience of him when I was in the police was a very, solid guy. So I do think that helps in terms of when the information comes out from someone who has a pretty solid reputation, that's very meaningful. I think it had to come from a general. If it came from anybody junior, it would just have been ignored. Now, what's interesting is that essentially he jumped over Fani Masemola, the National Commissioner's head, in doing this. Although it doesn't sound like Masemola is fingered in any of these shenanigans. As far as I've heard, again, I'm a little bit out the loop. I'm on the other side of the world. But it's interesting that he did that and didn't go to him and say there needs to be an announcement, etc. So he took a huge risk. And I think his status as a general and the public groundswell will hopefully protect him in that regard. Might he have his own designs on becoming somebody higher up? I don't know why anybody wants to be a general in the South African police. I think it's a thankless job, which you can never win. We'll see. But like I said, I think it had to come from someone at that level of rank. Otherwise, anybody else who'd done the same thing, a colonel or a captain, will probably be on the already have a disciplinary hearing against them for going to the media without consent from this Saps media office, etc.
Encouraging to see people out marching today. What so often seems to happen with these kinds of things is that there's a big flare up of public interest and it's kind of front and center in the media. But, a lot goes on in South Africa. And, politicians and those involved will want this to kind of become second, third, fourth page story. It's really something that, the problem, do you consider I consider the problem to be profound enough that it really does require the involvement of the man on the street, of us as the citizenry.
Yeah, look, if it is true that high politicians and high members of the police and the judiciary and the prosecution authority are involved, then there's going to have to be a lot of pressure and push to have something happen. And I've been saying this for a long time. Organized crime is probably one of our biggest threats now because it infiltrates everything from trafficking, drugs, just general state corruption to tenders. It's a massive thing that needs to be effectively dealt with by a competent police service. Now, unfortunately, it also starts to take root when you find that a police service starts to crumble, when there's not good effective control and management. Then you do find corruption, and you're not paying cops decent salaries, then you will find that organized crime will start to take hold and grow. And it grows. It doesn't ever just fizzle out by itself. It will grow and continue because the benefits are too great. If you can control the police, prosecution, the judiciary, you're safe. You're really safe. So I really do hope that something good. I mean, obviously, commission, if a commission investigation is done properly, they collect statements, that final file can be presented to the police. And if it's comprehensive enough, the police can arrest someone based on that file. So like in the Zondo Commission, they made sure all the investigators did things as if they were building a police case file. And they were all, I think, pretty much ex-police, Hawks, Scorpions investigators who were involved in the information gathering, the statement gathering. So those dockets were police ready. And literally, as long as the detective who gets the case goes through it and he doesn't feel there's anything else, and the prosecutor who gets the case to review says there's nothing else that needs to be added to this docket, they can arrest and prosecute. So, if it's done the right way, it's not like, oh my goodness, after this, we have to now repeat a whole police investigation from scratch. It can be done in a way that we're not going to be wasting time. I do like the idea that it's a very public forum, that everybody gets to sort of see and hear. Whereas if it gets prosecuted individually, will we start to hear and see little bits and pieces? So I do think it's perhaps not a bad idea. It's just what's going to be the outcome, of course.
Absolutely. It's one thing to talk about, infiltration at a leadership level at the very top. But one thing that's come up in our discussions over the years is this idea that organized crime have been putting their members through police training and kind of, from ground level up, really getting, infiltrating the police at that level. So it's potentially at all levels of the system that the problem exists, which makes, like a virus, makes it that much more difficult to root out in its entirety.
Yeah, look, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they've done that sort of, but that it's a very long game if you're doing that, because you get sent to the college, you don't know where you end up, you have to apply for positions. So it's much easier just to bribe people in the places where you need to have corrupted people, whether that's in the ballistics unit or in
Fair enough.
So that's the immediate route, and you can target exactly who's already there. This one is a far more long game because you don't know where that employee is going to end up. You might not get into a position that's really helpful. Of course, street corruption on a street level has always been around. The cop who pulls someone over for drink driving gets paid $500, but that's not sort of organized crime level corruption.
No, I guess my point is just that it's deeply entrenched into the system, and that's like, again, I think why public involvement is so critical, because we need to stay on top of this, on top of this story, and really on top of what happens now with the commission. All right, before we move on to our questions for this evening, let's take some questions and comments that people have been sending in on this topic. So first of all, we have a question from Marlene. Marlene's asking, is it within Mkhwanazi's job title to be able to disband the task team?
Yeah, good question, Marlene. So the Minister of the Police is not supposed to be operationally involved. Now, they're political appointees. They have the Civilian Secretariat, which looks at new policies for the police, etc. So they're more on a political level, civilian oversight, policy level maybe. They're not supposed to be sticking their nose into daily operations of the police or telling the National Commissioner what to be doing. Now, we saw that a little bit with Becicele, because, of course, Becicele in the past, for example, when I was in the police at one point, Becicele was the National Commissioner. Then he left under sort of suspicious circumstances and then later became the Minister of Police. But he was trying to be as if he was still in charge of the actual police and still, I think, wanted to refer to himself as general, although he was the minister, and kind of was trying to stick his nose more into the operational side of things. He's not supposed to be doing that. It's more the oversight role. And so that the person really in charge of policing, of course, is the National Commissioner, in this case, Fane Masemola, who's operationally responsible for the functioning of the SAPS, its budget, its success when it comes to crime fighting, etc. That's who you hold accountable, really, is the National Commissioner.
Okay. Pia says systemic corruption will persist, unfortunately. Marius says, good evening from the Southern Cape. Good evening, Marius. Nice to have you with us again. Leslie asked, Gerard, what are you doing sitting in a cell? Locked up already in Canada.
It's my place of employment has a little training room that has fancy selfie lights and a big screen TV that currently isn't working. And so I thought I'd try this out as an option. But yeah, I think it sort of fits the theme. Back to the 80s, man.
Okay, Marlene has asked, can you perhaps share more information on who Cat is and what he has done? I've got a bit of information on Vusamuzi Cat Matlala. He's a 49-year-old flamboyant government contractor, essentially known for his extravagant lifestyle. He has winning multi-million rand tenders. He's described as being at the center of he's involved in criminal syndicates, and corruption involving top politicians and assassination plots, etc. Just some of the legal troubles he's been in. Regarding a Saps contract in 2024, his company Medicare 24 was awarded a 360 million rand contract to provide health services to Saps employees. The contract was later cancelled due to procurement irregularities. He's alleged to have been involved in the Tembisa hospital scandal. There are, of course, these attempted murder charges, which is what he's sitting in prison for at the moment, I understand. And that's where essentially it was a conspiracy to kill his former partner, actress Tebogo Tobeane, who many will know from, the celebrity world and from the television screen. She's a soap actress. And he's suspected to have done this in collusion with a couple of people, including his wife, Sakani Matlala, who was also arrested in connection with the plot. And his current status is that he's detained at as a high-risk inmate in the CMAX section of Kosi Mampuru Correctional Center after a mobile phone was found in his cell, and he faces charges of attempted murder, conspiracy, illegal possession of firearms, and fraud. So there you go. This is one I prepared earlier. So that's the guy we're talking about. Paul, yes.
One thing I just wanted to comment on that I remember reading in the background is that they talk about linking a firearm to the murder of that engineer, and then later to, I think, DJ somebody. Now remember, linking a firearm is not the same as linking a person to a crime. That's the one thing. So the person who pulled the trigger in the engineer's murder, of course, you cannot say is the person who pulled the trigger in DJ somebody or anybody else. And firearms do get passed around and sold and lent out and hired out. So the link doesn't necessarily mean that there is a human link or a plot link between two murders that are linked to the same firearm. But that, of course, has to be investigated properly by whichever people.
Okay,
wanted to say that.
Just a note from Lauren here. She says, Karen Dolly of the Daily Maverick has been writing about organized crime for years within Saps, law enforcement, the judiciary, and local politicians. I think we should put her on our list of guests to chat to because you're right. I think she would be great to have on the show as well. I think a few journalists actually have been doing some great work on this. We must reach out to. I read some great stuff by my old mate Steve Groothuis as well on the Daily Maverick. All ministers must be vetted, and those with convictions or pending case should never hold positions within government. The entire SAPS needs to be re-vetted and the rotten apples removed ASAP. Hey, all common sense there, Gerard.
Yeah, look, I mean, personally, I think we should have, look, it's a matter of logistics mainly, but we should have regular polygraphs for, I mean, you could argue any cop. I mean, if you're working in policing, you should be asked on a 6-monthly basis, have you taken money from someone to avoid them getting into trouble? Are you involved in any outside business that's not registered with the police? So I do think that there should be regular vetting for as many as possible policemen and women through lifestyle audits. Like if you're driving a huge BMW, but you're a constable, how did you afford that? So lifestyle audits and then polygraphs. Then that should go, quite frankly, there's no reason why that shouldn't include ministers. If we really are serious about corruption, parole boards, I mean, absolutely, I think should be exposed to the lifestyle audits and polygraph tests every few months about whether they've engaged in any untoward activity with regards to their formal activities.
Shelley Foot asks, do you think that Ramaphosa is just giving this lip service, and do you think that this could end up with a rerun of the 2021 riots? What are your thoughts there, Gerard?
Oh, difficult to say. I don't know the judge personally. If he's a reputable judge, who will oversee this process. If he's not one of the corrupted judges, then hopefully, yes, the thing will go relatively well, and there will be a good, at least public bringing out of things into the light, and as I said, hopefully prosecutions as a result thereof. But yeah, too early to tell, really. But I mean, I don't know what else one can do but this, to be honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I think let's then, I think I've got a message from, just a post that was posted by Tebogo Tobejane, who was like we said, who was the attempted murder victim. She said, "Thank you for speaking." And this is her message to Mkhwanazi. "Thank you for speaking when so many stayed silent, for carrying a weight most will never understand. At some point, someone will truly stand up for us. I believe that. Thank you for holding hope, for believing that mothers can live for their children, even when the world makes it so hard. I don't know you personally, but I see your heart, and I'll keep praying for your peace, your healing, and your protection, because when one of us stands, we all begin to rise." Just a nice sentiment, I think. Okay, so Gerard, coming back to, I do think that we all need to be just aware of our role here as members of the public and citizens, and we need to think about what we can do individually to make sure that people are called to task for their behavior. All right, so we're going to be moving on now. What we've been doing is we've been, every week we collect all of your comments and questions on the channel, and we love your comments and questions. We try to respond and chat with as many of you as possible. A few of you we boot off for being idiots, but most of you are great. So what we've been doing what we thought we would do tonight is actually take a look at a bunch of your comments and questions and respond to them. And just have a nice general discussion about some of the cases that we've covered over the past few months and tackle some of your particular questions. So we're going to start off and I've themed them together. So we'll get through as many as we can. We'll see how it goes. Do keep dropping us your questions as well as we go, and we'll pop a few of those in. But let's take a look. So we're starting off with the criminal justice system, police procedures, and sentencing. So I just wanted just a comment that came up just recently in the last 24 hours, actually. I just wanted to draw to your attention and get your comments on, Gerard. So regarding the Michael van Eck case from Cornet MDW, saw Martins recently at a local shopping center. He was released this year. What are your thoughts there? Were you aware that he'd been released?
No, I wasn't, because I remember Shanae got the indeterminate sentence, which means she has to come back before a judge and they have to do like a resentencing in effect. Martin's got life, which means he should not be out. So I don't know if it was somebody that looked like him, but he shouldn't be out, that's for sure, because, I mean, when was that? He definitely has not served 25 years, which would be the minimum detention period on a life sentence. Because it was a premeditated murder. So, yeah, no, he definitely shouldn't be out by any circumstance.
Okay,
I mean, his mental health status would not be released based on that. He would be treated in hospital, in prison for his mental health issues. So, yeah, no, he should not be out.
Okay, well, then let's see if we can get anyone out there that has any further information, share with us, and we'll do our best to look into that on our side as well for next week. Okay, next question. At Tian Grobler 9048 brings up a point regarding confessions discussed in the Anisha van Niekerk case. He asks, why can't the police just make use of audio or video recording in the interrogation room? So whenever a suspect does confess, they have it as evidence that can then be used in court. Is that not something we do in South Africa?
It's more about the legal procedures for something to be regarded as a confession. So let's say I'm interviewing a suspect and he starts to, ask him about his background, where was he? And he just, you know what, Gerard, I did it. I killed her because she made me angry and I got my knife and I stabbed her. You're supposed to warn someone before they do a confession legally that what they're about to do is a confession. You have to go through certain, were you promised anything? There's a whole bunch of sort of legal questions that you need to put to the person, or at least make them aware of before they actually do that. So it's a stupid situation where you're theoretically actually supposed to stop someone if they start to sound like they're confessing to you as a cop and say, would you be prepared to tell this to a magistrate? or an independent officer who will go through all of those form with all the questions that are legally required before something can be regarded. So if you started off your interview, but those are confession-specific questions, so you couldn't start off your interviews putting those to the person if he actually isn't at the point of confessing. So even if you've said you have the right to remain silent, and then you say can be taken down a right and used against you, you have the right to an attorney, you have the right to apply for bail, still, what he tells you thereafter wouldn't be seen as a confession. So it's more got to do with the legal technicalities in our country of what would be regarded as a confession. And they don't like it when people do a confession to the detective themselves. They want it to create this barrier to be done to another commissioned officer, in other words, let's say a lieutenant, a captain and higher, who isn't involved in the case, or ideally, you take the person to do a confession in front of a magistrate.
Okay, next question.
It's basically because they don't trust the police. Sorry, and that's a historical thing. That's really what it boils down to.
No problem. Okay, on to the Muldersdrift rapist. Now, just to give you a little reminder of the context here. So in this case, essentially when they caught him, the investigating one of the detectives, who was a female officer, had struck up a bit of a relationship with him on the phone, a conversation. They were chatting fairly regularly. And this night that they caught him, they set up a sting operation in which essentially it was her job to keep him on the phone while they drove, very much like, in the moment, tracking down two vans on the street, tracking his signal, and they basically triangulated his signal and caught him kind of red-handed. And her question is, caught him busy doing stuff. If suspect wants to know if suspects can use an entrapment defense in cases where they are lured by Saps.
So what we did in the Muldersdrift case wasn't entrapment. Entrapment is usually when you're trying to, like you see it in American shows, where they have a female police officer dressed up as a sex worker, and she's standing on the side of the road, and a guy comes up and says, "Hey, baby, how much are your fees?" And she's going, "Well, what do you want fees for?" And he will, money for sex, and you get arrested. So you're almost, the argument there why that's looked down upon in many jurisdictions is because you can be enticing someone to do something that they wouldn't have done if you hadn't enticed them. And I do agree with that. If you have a guy who's a drug addict or a recovering drug addict, and he's trying his best not to do drugs, and you as a cop walks up to somebody and say, "Hey, do you want to buy some drugs?" And he does, and you arrest him. It's like a little bit unfair, and I kind of agree with that. So that's more typically what we see with entrapment. So even within the police, where the police are sort of playing along, pretending to be a buyer of goods for somebody that wants to sell, you have to get special permission, authorization from the courts to do something like that. So they control that very strictly so that it's not an abuse of people, an abuse of the police, abuse of sort of police behavior. But what we were doing is just tracking the guy down. And we just had Captain Knutzer on the phone with him chatting, and I think it was a phone call or a WhatsApp or SMSing at that time. It was merely that we can keep his phone active while we can trace him with the cell phone tracing technology. So that wouldn't anyway be seen as something of entrapment.
Okie dokie. Next, regarding the forensic pathology episode with our good friend Dr. Shakira Holland, viewer at Melvin Royan 1165 asks a technical question. Do you enter the fingerprints of deceased on AFIS?
Good question, Mal. So typically when at the mortuary, it is actually the job of the police to still identify the bodies. Although WITS, the Forensic Pathology Service in downtown Johannesburg, they do a lot more effort to try and identify bodies. But typically what you would do is you would take the fingerprints, preferably all 10, if the person has 10 fingers and they're not too decomposed, and then they run that through the Home Affairs database. So you're allowed to do that. And that's a much broader database of fingerprints because remember the AFIS system, all that's on AFIS are crime scene prints and arrest prints. And crime scene prints aren't always the greatest, and they're often not linked to somebody yet. So essentially, if you want to identify a person with AFIS, it is only people that have been previously arrested. So that's why the police, if the police could run crime scene fingerprints to the Home Affairs database, which I don't think they're allowed to do. I know they weren't allowed to do that a few years ago. That would be fantastic because that includes a much wider range of fingerprints, whereas the AFIS is just arrested people And then, of course, crime scene prints that might not yet be identified. So you'd rather run it through Home Affairs than APHIS. But you could, I guess, technically, but Home Affairs is probably the better option.
We filmed a piece in Pretoria at the mortuary there with the Red Cross, and they were scanning. It wasn't very nice, but they were scanning a corpse with digital scanners. Stuff that they use in identification as well. Do we have that kind of tech available?
So, typically, no. So typically what the extent of trying to identify the bodies at a mortuary would be fingerprints. I know, like I said, the Braamfontein mortuary in downtown Johannesburg, which is one of the most busy, covers I think 15 police stations and is one of the most busy in the country. Because it's linked with the Wits Forensic Medicine Department, they kind of do a lot. They have like a project on trying to identify bodies. So out of their own initiative, they would take DNA, they will take photographs, they will, of course, do the fingerprinting to try and do a lot more effort to at least have the information available. So let's say a family member comes, 6 months later, hey, we've been trying to find our missing person, we don't know where he is, and we're checking all the mortuaries. They will have a fingerprint, they will have a DNA sample, they will have a photograph. And if you say, well, I think it's this person, we have 5 bodies that were found in this time frame, you can take a DNA from that member who's come forward and compare it. You can maybe show them the photograph. That would be a quicker way of trying to get some idea if it's the right person, etc. I don't know if they take dental record x-rays. I'm not sure if they've got the facilities for dental x-rays. But they do definitely at Wits Mortuary, the Braamfontein Mortuary in Johannesburg, they do a little bit more effort to identify bodies. Of course, Saps has a victim identification center, which its job is to help identify difficult to identify bodies. They were originally created for things like mass casualty incidences, like a plane crashes or a bus crashes and burns on fire, things like that. But they have a lot of extra expertise in helping identify bodies.
Okay. And if you want to visit maybe the most terrifying place in the country, I think the Braamfontein Mortuary is up there. I think a night alone in that building, just the thought of it gives me the chills. I won't lie, because it is really the scariest place. The smell of it is just,
every time I pull up in that parking lot, and it's like my sinuses just go into protest.
But it's also just old, and there's now it's an old hospital, isn't it? And there's I think it was like
the maternity ward.
Yeah, and it was there was the black maternity ward and there was the white maternity ward from apartheid days. And one half of it is now a derelict building, essentially, which is terrifying in its own right. And then the other half is the mortuary. But it's also just a creepy building. It's just awful. And it's like, the one thing that somebody pointed out to me was little red dots on the wall where, blood from where the flies had left their kind of blood prints on the wall, and it's just the worst place ever.
No. And there was a recent article, I think, in News 24, because there's actually supposed to be a fancy, brand new, ultra modern forensic pathology mortuary built, I think, near the Charlotte Mkhwanazi Hospital.
Yeah, when is that opening?
The other one in that's just like contractors haven't been paid, and I mean that is like a state of the art modern mortuary. It's got everything, but because of contractors, building process, and that's again the Department of Public Works, not the Forensic Pathology Services, because Department of Works does all government buildings. So police stations, Department of Public Works. So if it's not painted properly or it's run down, it's Department of Public Works, not the police's fault. And it's just one of those ridiculous, typical bugger-ups of why things just don't get done in our government.
That said, it's also worth noting that there are more government departments that can do things to hinder law enforcement and the justice system than just the police itself.
Yeah. No, look, it's a multi. People often complain about, blood alcohol results take forever to get back, and that's government health departments forensic services, not the police's forensic services. But that slows down prosecution of drunk driving cases. So it's such a multifaceted thing that needs to all function together properly for criminal justice prosecutions and investigations to work effectively.
Exactly. And that's why we need, like you said, everyone to be vetted properly. On that, Nell asks, what is your opinion of subjecting journalists of popular media outlets to background checking, lifestyle audits, but more so annual polygraphs? Well, I think I'm the only journalist here, aren't I, Gerard? I mean, damn it, you get away with this because you're a psychologist. I put that up because I just wanted to acknowledge that Nell called us a popular media outlet, and yay us.
Oh. It's interesting.
If she's referring to us, that is.
Yeah. You know, I think the challenge with that, look, I think everybody should be held accountable for what they say and what they do, you know, whether there's a background check or not. And if people's stories are false, that must be tackled and be challenged, and people must take someone to the press ombudsman or whatever the other sort of fora that are there for dealing with journalists who publish bullshit. You know, journalism is one of those things that's vitally important to any democracy. So we must be careful that couldn't be used as a method of harassing journalists. So we have to be very careful in that regard. But absolutely, everybody should be held accountable for what they say and what they do. Journalists no less than anybody else.
That said, we are a kind of a member on the WhatsApp group of the local podcast community. And just this week, I was receiving messages about the fact that, you know, there are regulations coming into place, specifically talking about specifically aimed at folks like ourselves, content creators in the digital space, essentially. So you can go and check out about that online as well. Marlene said, I always thought that the whole reason Home Affairs takes fingerprints in the first, I always thought that is the whole reason Home Affairs takes fingerprints in the first place. You'd think, hey, Marlene?
For use for criminal purposes, no. It would be lovely. And it would be great if we DNA swiped everybody when they're born, that if we do find unidentified bodies, you know, chuck that DNA into the database. But again, there are always going to be human rights concerns. I personally wouldn't care if somebody has my DNA. I'm not planning to do anything dodgy. But you also have to think about it in the sense of what would a corrupt government do with this information one day?
Yeah.
You know, and I think you just have to look at other parts of the world where there's been big changes. I don't want to name countries. You know, what a government can do to target its citizens. There's always that balance that we have to think. It's great if you think things are working fine, but what happens if we get people who are not trustworthy in charge of that information?
Very good point. Tristan asks, will corporal punishment be reintroduced in South Africa, as Minister Peter Groenewald talked about, and what is the psychology around that? What do you think on that?
Just to clarify, because I see somebody else talk about capital. So corporal punishment,
capital,
like
yes, sorry,
school,
yeah,
giving people lashes.
Good point.
I don't think that'll come back.
But let's bring it back.
Capital punishment. I mean, a lot of people say that we should.
I never had a problem with taking some lashes, you know. It was like, rather that than writing lines out for hours after school. Take a couple, you know what I mean? Have your mates think you're cool. Although, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I grew up
maybe
under
a little
the
bit old school.
System. Yeah, like, I went to school mostly in South Africa and was subject to that. I was at boarding school, Pretoria Boys High. So I got lashes as a boarder on regular occasions. And I also went for a little bit of primary school in the States, where, of course, they didn't do that. It's about, would a parent feel comfortable about some teacher hitting their child with a cane? I think there are more effective ways of punishing people. I don't know if that's a solution. Regards to capital punishment, which is obviously the death penalty, look, it depends what you want it for. No penalty. You can have life without parole, but if people don't think they're going to get caught and successfully prosecuted, it doesn't matter what punishment you've got. That the research has shown. If I don't think I'm going to get caught, I don't care what the punishment is. Secondly is, what do you want it for, the death penalty? Because the research has shown it doesn't really lower crime rates. But if your view is, well, I just want these people out of society, I don't think we should be paying for them to be in prison, and you've done something horrible, let's take you out. Well, then it would achieve that. But it's not really that effective at actually dropping crime rates. And again, it's often we're trying to do that as a solution for ineffective law enforcement. And I think if you had effective law enforcement, I mean, other countries, and look at the countries with the lowest crime rates, which were probably some of the Scandinavian countries, Switzerland, I think, they don't have death penalty. So it's not a requirement to lower your crime rate. And again, that is a death penalty. That's going to affect people who are committing robberies and all the other things, rapes and house breakings and hijackings, etc. I mean, you don't get death penalty for that too. So
Tristan has just actually added another comment saying that he's asking about corporal punishment part. Can it be used to punish petty crimes potentially? I mean, I've not thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, again, when I was younger, if the cops caught a youthful offender, you could be sentenced to lashes. And it was quite a severe thing. You had to have a doctor present. And you can imagine this old warrant officer with a snor, a mustache, twirled up the ends, who just wants to give you those lashes.
Well, funny you say
It
that.
would definitely deter me.
When I was in high school, it was kind of said that our industrial arts teacher was like a police slasher. Like he was one of the guys that would go and do it for the cops. So he was like, you had to be really careful not to step out of line in his particular class.
One of the counter arguments always is, but does not that brutality just breed brutality?
Yeah.
I guess that's one of the arguments. Like I said, the lowest crime rate countries in the world don't have death penalty. They actually have if you look at, was it Norway with that Anders Breivik, that guy who was one of these lone mass murderers who planted a bomb outside Parliament and then went to that island and dressed up as a policeman and killed a whole bunch of people from the youth party. I think in Norway, and he killed countless people. The maximum penalty is like you can give somebody for any crime is 20 years. And your prison is more like a hotel with very rehabilitative slant to it. But they have the lowest crime rate in the world, those types of countries. So again, if we look at where things work and they don't know it's a crime, they're not using corporal punishment in their schools and they're not using capital punishment for the death to kill people who've committed murders or other serious crimes.
Good point. Okay, let's get back to some questions. I'm going to ask one or two more questions from this section. I want to jump forward to the forensic psychology part because as I suspected, I've got like 50 questions here and I think we've got through.
Hardly touched.
We've got through like 3. So from Naleen Smith on the Gabriela Cabrin's Alban episode asked, does South Africa make use of body behavior analysts when interrogations are taking place? And we spoke about whether or not we record a little earlier. So body behavior analysts or analysts.
No,
analysis
with you.
Analysts.
It's kind of, what do you call it? Body behavior. What's the other word that people use? It's kind of not really seen as a very scientific process looking at people's body language.
Okay.
For various reasons, people, if you don't know them, they might exhibit these behaviors all the time, but you're making interpretations that he's doing this, he bounces his leg, like I bounce my leg all the time. Oh, he's nervous now, he's anxious, he must be lying. So it's the kind of thing that it's easy to control, and there's a lot of question in terms of the science behind it. And if you consider how many people have been interviewed by police on a daily basis, you'd have to have so many experts properly trained. It would probably just be impractical, let alone it's questionable about the scientific science behind body language analysis. That's the first thing. Police don't record their interviews with suspects. You can if you want to, and if you have a video recorder. I used to try and do that all the time. I loved recording my interviews with offenders because I use them for my own personal development or use them for training. Sometimes I use my own equipment because Saps didn't have equipment. So I think the problems, firstly, is that a lot of guys would be scared to have their interviews recorded, that, they're being recorded also as part of the interview process. And if they do something wrong, some guys still do use heavy-handed tactics, which you wouldn't want recorded. And it's also, I think, a technology issue. Saps loves to break technology. Man, I can guarantee you'd have those video cameras after a year, half of them probably wouldn't be working, the batteries would be lost. And we saw this in prisons where they started to use, fingerprint IDs for a prisoner, when you would move from one section to another, or when you were called to court, that you would, have your fingerprint scanner. Okay, that is Gerard and he is due for court today. I think within a month, all that shit wasn't working. So that's probably the other practical side of it. It's a cost issue, and the stuff would just go missing, not work, and then you couldn't do an interview because you don't have a recording device. What do you do now? And you couldn't have cops using their phone. Be acceptable. Oh, it's just like, it should. The same question I saw earlier, someone about body cams. Yes, absolutely, we should have body cams. A lot of police in America were against it, but they realized that the body cam protects them just as much as it protects the public. Because now, if people want to make false accusations against you, you can but here's the body cam footage.
Exactly.
I didn't call you this. I didn't do that. You did pull a gun on me, or did make an action that looks like you're pulling a firearm. That could be understandable why the cops maybe then shot the guy and wounded him, etc. So yes, but again, I think the practicality of would the stuff work? Would the guys be just resistant to specifically corrupt cops? You don't want a body cam on you if you're a corrupt cop or you're not particularly doing your job properly. So there are probably a lot of resistance from the individual police members. If it was implemented, you'd probably find that a lot of them just get broken by accident. But it would be an absolutely fantastic thing, and I would be all for it, the interviews and the body cams.
There would be so fewer cops drinking soft drinks throughout the day, no? That said, I mean, it does speak to the kind of bigger national crisis that we're talking about, is that, guys, we must remember it's going to be one thing fixing the problem, but maintenance is important. Okay, we've got to get good at maintenance. It's one thing having a great constitution, but we got to maintain it. It's one thing having laws that make sense, but you got to maintain them. These things all need to be looked after. And anyway, okay. So next question. Let's move on to the next question. We are now going to ask about the Jacques Duplessis case. And Trudy5609, who identifies as a retired detective, commented on the Jacques Duplessis. I think we are way too lenient on criminals here. Is this a common sentiment you've encountered among law enforcement professionals? I was curious to ask your opinion on this. What is the sentiment, in your opinion or in your experience?
I don't think law enforcement, when I say law enforcement, I mean police members, are too lenient. I think possibly, remember that it's ultimately the judge or the magistrate that decides the sentence. So I think there are cases where I'm quite surprised that the sentence was so lenient. I think Mariska, I'm trying to think, was it 10 or 13 years that she got? But in that particular case, the judge took into account that there had been this domestic violence incident that evening between the two of them back and forth, and that was taken into account. But for murder, we typically see, for a spontaneous murder in South Africa, 13 to 15 years is very common for that type of murder, and non-premeditated, not pre-planned. Of course, your premeditated murders are automatic life sentence according to the Minimum Sentences Act. Now, do I believe that even a non-premeditated murder, spontaneous murder, should get more than 13 to 15 years? Absolutely, but the courts see it differently. So, what we feel and what we would like to have happen and what happens in reality, unfortunately, we don't have control over that. So, I do think specifically for murder and rape and child abuse, we should have massively stiff penalties.
And the next question,
horrific crime.
The next question is going to relate to that. But before we continue, just a quick reminder how you can support the show. Please make sure that you do hit subscribe if you haven't already, with notifications. That's the little bell. Then you won't miss an episode of any content that we drop. To help us keep the lights on, you can also click join, and there's the join button around. We've also got the link in the explainer. And become a channel member, and you get exclusive perks. We post, you get early access to stuff, and we post some original content there as well. Or you can use the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description below, which we introduced recently. So if you want to support the show and the growing alternative media, then do that. This is where we're at the moment with our subscriber count, 26,113. That's we're of course aiming to get to 50,000. So help us get there, guys. That's our next big goal. We'll plan some great content for you guys when we get to that 50,000 mark. Okay, on to the next question. Following the episode on the Sunday rapist Jaco Steyn, I don't know why. There it is. User @Condor1584 stated, time for the South African law to be changed to life imprisonment without the chance of parole. Is life without parole a sentencing option that is being seriously debated in South Africa?
So when the whole issue of the death sentence and what's the alternative, a life sentence, and is that a cruel and unusual punishment, the only thing that allowed a life sentence to pass a, I guess you can say, constitutional constitutional requirements, was the fact that you have to have the option of possibly one day getting parole. And that is why we have our life sentences have a minimum detention period. Remember, minimum detention period of 25 years, after which you'll have parole hearings. You're not guaranteed to get parole at 25 years. You have to have parole hearings. And if you don't, for whatever reasons, get it, then the next time you don't get it, then the next time you don't get it, you can die in prison. But if you do eventually get parole, you then serve the rest of that life sentence in the community with restrictions. So you're still serving the life sentence till the day you die, but you might just be out in the community with restrictions on your behavior, what you can do, where you can go, etc. And if you bugger up, you're pulled back into the prison and you continue to serve in prison until you get parole again. So no, to answer your question, it would not pass the current constitutional requirements. Do I think it should be? I do think we should have, for some very serious, heinous criminals, that there should be such an option like that, maybe used in very restrictive circumstances. You know, if you've raped and murdered a child, I just don't want you back in society, to be honest with you. If you planted a bomb and killed a bunch of people, or you're a serial murderer, I just don't think you should be given a second chance in life to be living a free person's life. And we should not take the chance that you've been rehabilitated, because how do we know until we let you out and we see? And I don't think we should be testing your rehabilitation on, potential victims in the community. But as much as I would love it that there is an option for life without parole, I doubt it would pass the constitutional requirements.
Just a comment that Anne Barnes made. She said, thank goodness they don't use body language specialists. When I'm shocked, I start laughing, which is not good. Now, I brought this comment up because it relates to another question that came up that I just thought we could talk about. It just popped it into my head. On the Stuart Vulcan episode of South African Serial that we posted, Detective, it's Nosworthy, isn't it? Derek Nosworthy was the investigator there. And when he's recounting the story, as he's telling the story, he's kind of it was interpreted as laughing. Now, he's obviously not laughing. Can you just explain that for people? Just kind of how people react. May their reactions may not kind of align to the narrative.
Yeah, I mean, that you see that commonly with, things like paramedics, firefighters, police members, etc. People doing these sort of high stress, very often very graphic and gruesome jobs, or forensic pathologists for that matter, that there is a kind of gallows humor in a way that sometimes pops in, that you can see something at a crime scene where there's a dead body right over there, but you can see something over there that kind of makes you giggle. And it is, I guess, a kind of a defense mechanism in a way. I think you do become a bit numbed to the type of work you do, to the tragedy. So I just see it even now, and I've been out of the police for, since 2016, where something that would absolutely horrify another person is, for me, it's like, yeah, okay, or, oh my goodness, this person passed away, but like they were 90 and they had a really great fulfilled life. And I'm thinking, why are you sad about that? I mean, I know so many people who were murdered when they were 15, 16 and raped and killed. They didn't get the chance to live a great life. So I do think it changed your perspective, and it is a bit of a defense mechanism for people to cope and deal with very horrific things that are really beyond the norm of what we shouldn't be seeing as human beings.
Yeah, great. I just wanted you to, all the folks there watching, just to acknowledge the fact that, we really do keep track of your comments and your feedback on the channel. And these are some of the cases we've adding into our list. So, for example, the Annika Smith case, the murder of Inga Lotz, Shannon Matthews murder. So I'm not going to linger on this for too long. I want to move on to the next section. But just so you know, guys, we really do appreciate when you suggest cases. We've got, hopefully years of doing this still to come as we grow and, continue to bring you great true crime content. So please do share your case ideas with us. But a few questions, I think, Gerard, just on, your particular area of expertise, where you're really the master, psychology of killers and the profiling process. So let's take a look at a couple of questions here. On the Boetie Boer Vulcan episode, at Linda van Alphen 5046 found the investigating. We covered that question. Shocking, saying it gives me the creeps. Is this a common coping mechanism? Yes. Okay, great. So we tackled that. Sorry. In the pastor's murder, the killing of Liesel de Jages, at Leopard Serenade 4714 speculates that a panic button activation days earlier might have been the trigger for the killer. How often is a single event the final trigger for a murder that has been building up over time?
Yeah, look, I mean, we always say that nobody snaps. We often see it with these mass shooters who go into a shopping mall or a school or whatever, and then they say, the person snapped. Nobody snaps. There's always a build-up. There's a lead-up. There's circumstantial factors, undoubtedly. There's individual factors internally, your psychological state of mind. Are you on drugs? Are you drinking? Your financial stressors, your relationship stressors, your accommodation stressors. I'm trying to think what are the other typical risk factors we look for. That's probably the key ones. personality, and they all interact. And yes, I mean, there can be maybe one final trigger, but it's a trigger sitting on top of a mountain of other issues. So maybe, if that one thing hadn't triggered the person today, is it very likely that the same event could have happened a week down the line? Yes. So there's never that one trigger. It's on top of this huge mountain of issues.
I was watching something on YouTube on another true crime channel where there's a psychologist, and he was saying when it comes to psychopaths, when they're kind of in the act of murder, that they're quite neutral from a personality point of view, quite this disaffected personality that a psychopath kind of has, that they will be kind of looking for a trigger that kind of then kicks them into action, into the actual act. Yeah. Talk about that a bit.
Yeah, so there was that case in Cape Town. What was his name? And it's on the tip of my tongue. He was a young guy. His father was quite involved in the gangs. He was, I think, like 17, 18. I want to say Calvin somebody, that doesn't sound right. Okay. And he was just like a really like this, the sort of Hollywood image of a psychopath. You look at him wrong and he's going to kill you. Or, he just thinks that he doesn't like the way you look. And he would just randomly then walk around and end up killing people. And there he sees the girl, okay, I'm going to go rape her and kill her. But thankfully those types are quite rare. But yeah, I mean, you do walk around with it. We all walk around with our personalities. And unfortunately, a psychopath, which is a sort of personality disorder, they will walk around with that. And your personality really determines how you interact with people. So I'm generally laid back, kind, friendly, kind of tries to be helpful where I can. So I take that into all my interactions, whether it's at work or in the street, in a shop, when I'm shopping, hopefully when I'm driving, etc. But if I have this psychopathic personality where I view the world as hostile, or I'm just an ramped up asshole, then I take that into all my interactions. And if I throw in a bit of narcissism and I think I'm always right and you're always wrong, I take that all around with me. So the personality is like this bubble that is all around you all the time. Unfortunately, with the really bad ones, like your very bad psychopaths, and the majority of psychopaths, are not running around raping and killing people. I remember when I was having some training about assessing psychopaths, and the videos that they were showing us, and these were some of the videos used in the original development of what's known as the Psychopathy Checklist, PCLR, which is like the gold standard developed by Bob Hare to assess psychopathy. And I was watching some of those original videos, and I said to the guy training me, Dr. Stephen Hart, who worked with Robert Hare, and I said to Stephen, but these guys seem quite normal. And he said, but yes, the thing is, in the police, you're working with that tiny sliver of the psychopaths who are very bad people. They will do criminal stuff. The majority of the psychopaths are just like real assholes. And they might be breaking social norms, but they're not robbing, stealing, raping, cheating. They're doing all the other bad things in society that are not nice, but they're not the criminal types. So, it's often just where you work skews your perception, or TV skews your perception of what psychopaths are all like.
Okay, great. A lovely question here from user @MarkStracy. A forensic pathologist from the Western Cape commented in one of our episodes stating, I do fingernail scrapings regardless of whether the hands were bagged or not in cases like these, because the autopsy is the last time evidence can be collected from the body. Gerard, how crucial is that level of diligence from pathologists to your work as a profiler?
Yeah, look, I have arguments regularly with forensic pathologists about this particular issue. The hands weren't bagged and not take nail scrapings. And there are arguments because then it could be contaminated. It could be scrapings from the people who picked up the body, or as it's lying there, somebody walks past and there's a nail scraping with some DNA on it. Or that's a stupid argument for me, because if you find DNA and it matches somebody who was a very likely suspect, or the guy who's found in possession of the items that were stolen from the household where this woman is murdered, then it is absolutely relevant. But the fact that it's relevant because that scraping could be from anybody else, well, you're not going to prosecute someone just on a nail scraping, because there are, as I said, various explanations. So I'm really against that, because, as I said, you'd have to have other evidence, because, right now we'll probably all have nail scrapings and possible DNA from other people, because that's life. You touch someone, you might scrape them a little bit, you sport, etc. There's various reasons why you could have someone's DNA under your fingernails. So I think it's always about the context of that DNA. It's the same with semen in a case. Semen in a woman's vagina or a woman's anus doesn't prove rape. it proves that a person deposited their semen. And if that was a consenting sexual act, then it's not rape. So DNA always has a contextual circumstances around it. It's not proof of a crime. But come and explain why your DNA was there. And as I said, you've been found to have the cell phone belonging to this person, and you were seen in the area. That is absolutely important evidence, whether your hands were bagged or not. So I disagree with pathologists on that.
Okie dokie. A user commented on the Etwatwa axe murders episode, stating, it takes a special kind of depravity to do something like this. Gerard, what does it take for a 14-year-old to be able to kill his entire family, including his baby sister, with an axe? I mean, at such a young age, these types of heinous crimes, I mean, it seems so, just unexplainable.
Yeah, look, I mean, this isn't a kid who just got into a fight or shoplifted from something from a store. A lot of kids do stupid stuff in their adolescent years with their adolescent brain, and they'll grow up to be absolutely normal human beings. But when you're talking about this level of violence or sexual violence, it's a very negative prognostic indicator for the person's future from a risk perspective, a risk violence, risk assessment perspective. So definitely when you've gone into something this extreme, which is such a rare crime, going and murdering a whole family, when we hear about them, but if you look at the number of murders, this is a 0.0001 kind of scenario. You'd have to wonder, is this person not going to grow into a psychopath one day of the very bad aggressive types? Now, of course, at the age of 14, we cannot make that finding because personality is still in development. But it will be very interesting to follow up and see how is he doing in prison? Is he behaving, following by the rules? Is he aggressive, etc.? So, yeah, it's such a rare thing. We don't have a good base rate of people to study. Definitely not. I mean, most of the people family murders I worked on, the people were like 18 years and older, sort of around, I think, what was the guy from Quonazi? He was 17, I think, when he committed it. But most of them are sort of a bit older. So it's just such a rare thing. And 14-year-old, I think that's the youngest personally I've heard of in South Africa of a family murder, that it would be difficult to predict what exactly is this kid's problem. And I know my colleague Bronwyn Stolos, who worked in the unit at the time, was involved in this case.
How do you deal with just the tangible memory of something like that and all of the feelings that kind of come along with the act that, you experienced, and therefore they are kind of imprinted there?
As the offender?
As the offender. I mean, or as the psychologist, what do you... Because, that, or how would you do you talk about that? Like, how do you tackle that memory? Do you get what I'm saying? I'm like, because they say that guys relive these things. So it's like, well, you might be dealing with, aspects of behavior and explaining why it's right and wrong, etc. But, if it was a thrill for the person, they've got the like I say, that kind of tangible memory of it. That's kind of imprinted, isn't it?
Well, look, I mean, so some, like serial murderers, they will try and relive the crime. They'll take a souvenir, and whether it's a piece of underwear or literally an item from the household where they killed someone, and that'll help them as a stimulus for that incident. And they get gratification from reliving it. I guess it also depends on what was your motive for doing it. If it was purely out of anger versus you got a kick out of it. Well, I think if you got a kick out of it, you're more likely to sort of want to relive it and to recreate that feeling that you had at the time. And if it's a sexually arousing thing, of course, then you would probably masturbate. And that, again, is like a re-imprinting of it. You think about it and you masturbate. It's Pavlov's dog. You're giving a reward for a thought. So that does help imprint it. That's why also when we deal with post-traumatic stress, in the old days, it used to be, tell me about it, tell me all the details about it. And now we realize, but just getting people to talk about it over and over, I mean, think about it. When you were younger, how did you study for an exam to remember something? Repetition.
Exactly.
So if you're going to be in a therapeutic role, getting people to tell you the story over and over about this traumatic event, or telling, just not even in therapy, but you're telling everybody who's curious, that helps imprint the memory and keep it there. So,
interesting.
Yeah, and I think it'll be different for different people. If you're the policeman who arrives in that scene, I think it's just absolutely horrific thing to arrive to. Us who are looking at it from the crime scene photos, it's much more distant and clinical and easier. And we're approaching that case with a different angle of why we are there. So I think it's for the different people. I mean, paramedics and first crime scene responders, I feel very sorry for them. I think they are the biggest emotional load.
Yeah. There's this kind of like chasing the dragon aspect that we speak of, that I think you talk about. I don't know if that's a good way to phrase it, but this idea, you take someone like the Golden State Killer who started as a house burglar, or even the Norwood, started as a house burglar, progressed to rapes, but then progressed to murder kind of thing. Is there any study on a psychopath that is, somebody who's a killer who's put in prison then is released? Would they kind of pick up from where they left off with regards to, how they want to approach it, or they have to go back a few steps to start? Again, am I asking?
Interesting. Look, we've had a couple serials who were then released, and as far as we know, they haven't offended. We've had quite a few that were caught after one crime, went to jail, came out, and then were just prolific in their series. They became serial murderers thereafter. So it's a difficult one to answer. Our concern is that it's a massive risk to do it, and we don't know really whether we've fixed anybody who's a serial murderer. And I always just believe we should err on the side of caution. And, well, look, dude, you've killed a bunch of people in the past. You've shown us what you can do. We have no idea to know whether you're actually rehabilitated. And I think it's not fair that you expect we should take a chance with other people's lives by letting you back into the community.
Yeah.
That's my point of view, and I'll stick to that. Like I said, we've had one or two serials that I know that were released after having been sent to prison for serial behavior that don't seem to have done anything. But like I said, we've also had ones, like I said, they were caught, like Moses Satole, went to jail for a rape, came out and became the Moses Satole that we all know. The Quarry Killer, same thing. In for rape, came out and became the Quarry Killer that we all know. So I just think it's a risk. Yeah. We definitely don't know how to rehabilitate them. Why do we want to take a chance?
Yeah. Does the fantasy continue where it left off? I guess that's what I was asking. Do you think that if a psychopath goes through intense therapy, there's a chance the person can be cured? And I guess that's his...
Short answer to that, nope. We don't know how to fix psychopaths. And you've got to be very careful, because if you don't know what you're doing, you can actually end up giving the psychopath better manipulation skills. Because what do we try and teach people in therapy about empathy and how you should behave and, right kind of responses, wrong kind of responses? The psychopath is using that to learn about how to manipulate people. So you have to be very careful from a therapeutic point of view if you're doing anything. But we don't talk about curing psychopaths. You fizzle out typically in your late 50s. You're not as much of a psychopath in terms of your behavior. You're still not a nice person, though.
Okay. Gerard, I know you need to get back to threat assessing there in Canada. We're going to do a couple more questions, if that's okay. Referring to Butibur Vulcan, Janetta Joy asks a fundamental question. Why don't these guys ever seem to go after the abusers? Why do serial killers who are abused as children so often target innocent strangers instead of those who harmed them?
Yeah, I think it's sometimes a practical issue that they don't know where they are. I mean, Butibur was before the days of Facebook and, internet. He was abandoned as a kid. He eventually traced his mother after he was in prison. I don't know if he ever managed to find his sister. So it's a question maybe the people aren't alive. He doesn't know how to get hold of them. But yeah, you kind of wish that they would. If they're going to do it to anybody, rather do it to the person that you're really angry with as opposed to some innocent kid. Yeah. Not that I want people to go out murdering anybody. Just put that out there. And I guess maybe it's also the psychological fear of the people that abused you. In your mind, they were these big monsters. Yeah, it's safer to go target someone else who represents that kind of a person. Or maybe it's convenience, I can target something who's representing that person who's in my immediate environment. Fair question.
Marlene says, that makes me think of Ed Kemper. And Marlene, that's exactly what it made me think of, because we know Ed carried his mother's head around in a bag, I think, after he'd done terrible things to it. So he certainly, and handed himself in once the co-ed killer. So he was killing young women there in California. Was it California? I think it was. And then killed his mother and a week later handed himself in. So interesting. All right. Let's see. Just a couple more questions here, Gerard. And then we'll bank the rest, and we'll do another one of these episodes because they're great. Again, on the Christine Slabbert on the Butibur episode states, there's no such thing as a natural-born killer. Serial killers are made. Gerard, what is your professional opinion on the nurture versus nature debate when it comes to serial killers?
That's such a that's about anything. Were you born a psychopath or not? Were you born? I don't know. I don't have a good answer. Let me start off with that. But if I look at the spectrum of lives that these people have had, just the South African ones even, you'd think, well, they must have been viciously abused. They must have had the Boetie Boer Stuart Wilken, background, who was, horribly abused as a kid, abandoned, really, really, multiple people throughout his life, horribly abused. But he's an outlier. The majority of serial murderers had kind of relatively normal, plain, boring lives growing up, or lives that were no different to thousands of other people in our country who didn't become serial murderers. So I don't think nurture is a good enough explanation. I think there has to be something in you that's going to make you react this way. And then, of course, you're reacting to your environment on top of that. That's the best way I can explain it.
Okay, great. And then our last question from the batch that I put together here, Gerard. Let's see if it comes up. Hey, I don't know what's going on with the slowness tonight. Viewer at Laura Durant 730 asked a direct question on the Profiling Killers episode. What did you study at university to be a profiler? So how did you become a profiler? Just remind us, Gerard.
So you can't actually, well, definitely not in South Africa, study to become a profiler. So I'd studied clinical psychology, did my master's in clinical, later did my doctorate in psychology, later did a master's in criminology and an LLB. But the majority of profilers throughout the world, if you look at law enforcement agencies that have properly people in positions as profilers, they're detectives that have gone and received additional training in the various aspects, from understanding pedophiles to interviewing to basic forensic pathology skills to crime scene reconstruction to ballistics reconstruction to threat assessment. I mean, when I did my training, it was a whole wide spectrum of fields that we needed to have exposure to. But typically they're law enforcement detectives who've worked in violent crime, sexual crime, who've undergone a sort of training program that's aimed at training you to become a profiler. But it's a lot of sort of more law enforcement stuff. So there's very, 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 very few psychologists who were profilers. And Mickey was one, obviously, myself. Elmarie in the unit now has a honors in psych and criminology, so she has more of that kind of background. But we will all receive training to become profilers once we were in the police. So I don't know if you might find a university that has a course in it. Would that be seen by professional profilers as an adequate exposure? Because so much of it is law enforcement experience. You have to understand crime scene behavior. You have to understand forensic pathology, bloodstain pattern analysis. So a lot of it is just kind of the courses that you can only really do in law enforcement to get those necessary skills. Okay.
Gerard, I have one last question for you. What was it that ultimately drew you into this career? Where, and like for you, what is it that initially interested you, and what is it that continues to excite you and interest you about what it is that you do?
So when I went into psychology, I never thought I was going to do anything to do with forensic work. I mean, I always say, like many people, I was interested in criminal behavior and crime movies, and The Silence of the Lambs was my days of the university, But I never thought I was going to follow it as a career path, specifically because in South Africa, there just wasn't really a career path for it to follow. But again, like I said, I had to do a dissertation for my master's, and I thought, oh, well, a friend of mine who was studying with me, he was technically in the police. They allowed him to study his master's. And he said, well, let's do it on serial murder. That's interesting. I'm like, sure, that is interesting. Let's do that. But still, that wasn't with the idea that I'm going to become a profiler one day or do any forensic work. I thought I was going to have a private practice, maybe work at a hospital like Westcorp is in Pretoria, which is a government psychiatric hospital, and do my stuff. But I guess, maybe the university knew better than I where I was going to end up. I find criminal behavior fascinating because it's just another example it's an extreme example of human behavior. And as a psychologist, I'm interested in human behavior. Other people would be interested in relationships. That's why they do couples therapy. Other people would be interested in kids and their just issues. That's why they become, focusing on children. I just found human behavior in its extreme form, which criminal behavior is, just really, really fascinating. And obviously, having left the police, my focus now is on preventing people from doing something like attacking someone or shooting someone in the workplace or etc. So I found that more rewarding because in the police, the crime had been committed. We couldn't stop that. We're dealing with the aftermath of getting justice for the victim, getting the guy behind bars. Whereas now, my work is focused on, as early as possible, intervening, assessing the situation, and developing a pathway that someone doesn't go and do the harmful behavior. And I find that very, very rewarding.
Yeah, and you know, the opportunity to innovate in that regard as well, and find new ways to solve some of the problems. Of course, I doubt you also anticipated that it would lead you to become the most gorgeous man in crime, which, you know, one of the positive kickbacks there, Gerard.
I wish I was in control of the comments. I'd post some about you or make some up. But I don't have control over that.
You know what? I managed to the tradition in the old days when we got started. It always used to be that I was talking too much. Hopefully, I've curbed that a little bit. These episodes, maybe not so much, but yeah, the general feedback has always been let Gerard talk. So I try to do that. Gerard, as always, it's been lovely chatting with you. How's are you settled now? Finding cool stuff to do, finding good restaurants there, making friends?
Yes, I am settled. Yeah. You know, buying furniture, all those little things that one has to do, and buying the spatulas and mundane things that you have to do when you relocate to somewhere else. So.
Exciting, because you're learning to navigate kind of what the shops are like over that side and all that kind of thing. Fantastic. Guys, of course, we will keep an eye on what's going on with the state of the nation. I think some of the things I just thought we could look out for, just advise you guys to look out for as the case now unfolds over the next couple of weeks. I'll just put up a slide here. So first of all, what will the first moves of the Nhlanhla Commission be? Certainly worth keeping an eye on, how effective they are from the get-go. Gerard, do you know much about kind of what it takes to initiate a commission like this? Have you had any involvement with these kinds of commissions?
I know not. I just think they have to be approved by the president, as far as I know.
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll certainly over the next few weeks try to bring in some guests for discussions on the show to help kind of illuminate some of the aspects. What will the new acting minister's first actions be? What will there be any pushback from the accused? Something we've not seen yet, kind of play out. And yeah, something I'm interested in is certainly, the one thing that you have to say about Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi is that he's certainly a brave man because, the people that he's calling out are dangerous people, Gerard.
Yep, you're tackling organized crime. They're not going to like it. So, yeah.
So we're all going to be wishing him the best, and folks must just stay away from Quonazi, that's for sure. And let's see how it plays out over the next few weeks. Hopefully the conversations that we have will start to slowly turn, and we'll start to be talking about, they're fixing this at the police and they're doing that over there. Hopefully that's in our future. Thank you very much, guys. Just a last reminder to please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. If you hit the bell, that will just give you a notification for when we post new content. You can also support us by heading over to our Patreon page. You can become a channel member, or you can buy us a coffee. Thank you, Gerard. Appreciate you.
Thanks, everybody, new and regulars. Thank you.
Get back to saving Canada, and we'll carry on doing our best down south here, okay, to make sure that we right the ship. Thanks, everyone, for watching. We appreciate you. And remember, trust nobody.
I am a human being and I killed human beings.
Before I knew it, I'd fired 4 shots at the door. I kept on shouting for Eva to phone the police.
Tests are underway to determine if a serial killer is on the loose in Centurion, Pretoria.
The dead won't bother you. It's the living you got to worry about.